Former candidate Andrew Yang joins us now. And first, quickly, let me play you, Andrew, a moment from tonight. This is Biden questioning whether Sanders' Medicare for All plan would really be suited for the moment we're facing.
With all due respect to Medicare for All, you have a single-payer system in Italy. It doesn't work there. It has nothing to do with Medicare for All. That would not solve the problem at all. We can take care of that right now by making sure that no one has to pay for treatment, period, because of the crisis. No one has to pay for whatever drugs are needed, period, because of the crisis. No one has to pay for hospitalization because of the crisis, period. That is a national emergency, and that's how it's handled. It is not working in Italy right now, and they have a single-payer system.
Andrew Yang joins us. You know him as the head of the Yang Gang, also a newly minted CNN political commentator who has endorsed Joe Biden. How did you feel about your man's answer there?
Well, I think Joe had a great point, but then he also missed Bernie's point. So he had a great point where it's a capacity problem right now. We're not sure we have the hospital beds, the protective equipment, the facilities, or the healthcare providers in order to actually serve everyone who's going to come in. And so Italy is an example where you have single-payer healthcare and they have capacity issues, and Joe was right in saying we need to build capacity. But Bernie was also right in that millions of Americans right now are completely steering clear of the healthcare system because they don't think they can pay for it. They're not even sure if they have a provider to go to. And so this is heightening anxiety around how we're going to respond to the coronavirus, where millions of Americans don't even know how they're going to go about getting tested or whether they can see a doctor. So Joe had a point, but Bernie had a point as well.
Andrew, do you think that they recognize the moment they're in enough tonight?
You know, I don't think they did, honestly, and despite the fact that they both talked about the coronavirus for quite some time. But if you look at the CDC's announcement where they think that we shouldn't have gatherings of 50 plus for 8 weeks, that's 2 months. And you live in New York City, Chris, you know what closing all the restaurants and bars will mean for tens of thousands of bartenders, waitresses, parking attendants, cooks, security guards. These are not people who can go home and just sit around for weeks or months on end. We need to have a dramatic economic stimulus, and they talked about making workers whole, even as these workers are losing wages or jobs. There's no way we can make these workers whole without actually just sending checks. And I wish that one or both of them had just come clean and said, look, if we're going to do this, we actually have to put money to work in a very different and dramatic way.
Now, what do you think it means? Let's move off the politics and just talk practicality for a second. Bernie Sanders seemed comfortable with the idea of delaying primaries, moving them back. Now, you can either see that as just an authentic answer or, yeah, it works for him. The more time he has, the better before primaries, because it's looking bad for him right now. But in terms of the process and the pressure to keep people from big groups, it is tough to argue at the same time that you should be holding primaries on one level, is it not?
It is really hard. I mean, they had a debate to an empty room. They've canceled all rallies. And so saying that people should turn out in droves in these states and wait in lines, though I will say if you vote, the lines will probably be pretty short. So if you do show up, like, it might not actually be much of a risk that way. But the states are moving forward on Tuesday, even though some other states have pushed it back. And the fundamental dynamics of this race have probably just about frozen in place, as David Axelrod was saying, because of the fact that the public's attention has turned to the coronavirus. Yeah. And you're going to see voting turnout, in all likelihood, plummet upcoming because people are staying at home.
Well, especially when you have CDC guidance saying don't be in groups more than 50. And every polling place is certainly going to have more than that, except in remote counties. What's your best sense, Andrew, of whether or not one or both of these gentlemen changed their fates tonight?
I think Bernie had a very strong night. He presented himself as a very steady, consistent messenger. I think Joe engaged with Bernie more than I thought he would. I thought he was going to be Trump, 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 and just like pivot to the general as much as possible. I also think Joe really missed an opportunity to speak to young people when questioned about it. Instead, he just talked about how he was winning anyway. And I thought that was a missed opportunity. But the fact is, Bernie needed a complete transformation of the dynamic of the race tonight, and that required not just for Bernie to have a great night, which he did have, but it required Joe to do something truly self-sabotaging, which he did not do. And so I think this race is going to continue to have Joe as the prohibitive favorite.
Andrew Yang, always a pleasure.
You did have Yang on, and I thought he made a good point, which is that if we're going to be honest, the only way to keep the economy from going into a complete free fall now is to put money directly into the hands of people. And that is, Yang's sort of, UBI, universal basic income. That repurposed in a crisis could make a huge difference. It would have been smart, you're trying to figure out how to put stuff together. If Biden had come out and said that, he might have inherited a big chunk of the Yang gang. That's some energy and some smart stuff.
Put the money in our hands. 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 Can we afford it? Yes. Will it cause inflation? No. Is it awesome? Yes. Is anyone trying to make it happen? Yeah, that guy.